official reminder. Huh?
It's not on. It's not on.
Well, turn the switch all the way over from those guys. Okay, I want to begin by telling everyone how pleased I am, and I know he is, that Ernest came in here tonight without his walker and mostly without a lot of the pain that he has been experiencing. I know last Wednesday night he sat there and grinded his teeth. Sitting down really gave him a lot of trouble.
Wow.
Well, you do a lot of misunderstanding. Yes. But anyway, I'm going to thank the good Lord that he has made so much progress in the last 7 days, and he's here without any help at all. So I hope the progress for Brother Watson continues. Okay, we're in 1 Kings chapter 13, and we've had the death of Solomon. We've had Rehoboam, his son, take the kingdom. We've had 10 of the 12 tribes taken from him and given to Solomon's former workforce supervisor, Jeroboam, and given to him. And one of Jeroboam's first acts after becoming king was to set up a golden calf in Bethel, about 10 miles north of Jerusalem, and another one way up in Dan at the northern extremity of the territory. And as he was offering sacrifices at this brand new, unauthorized, false worship site at Bethel, the Bible tells us that a young prophet from the south, from Judah, comes across the border and comes up to Bethel to visit Jeroboam, and he promptly and in very few words condemns Jeroboam for what he is doing. That's back in chapter 13, the first few verses of chapter 13. Did I say we were in chapter 15? 13, okay. Had we wondered about that too?
Mine's about the golden calves at Bethel in chapter 12.
Yeah, that's where he is. He's at the golden calf in Bethel. Yeah, offering sacrifices, getting it set up. I guess consecrating it, if you want to call it that. And a young prophet from Judah comes up there and confronts him about the false worship and the false altar that he has set up, and Jeroboam didn't like it, and he stuck out his hand to order probably one of his men to take him. And you remember what happened then? It shriveled up, became useless. And then his attitude quickly changed. Oh, please, secure my hand, young prophet. And the young prophet did that for him. And then what Jeroboam do? Probably to thank him for what he had done, he asked him to come home and eat with him. Remember, share a meal together? But what were the orders that the young prophet was given before he ever left Judah? 2 things. That's right. Don't associate, don't fellowship with these people at all, and don't come back the same way that you came up there. Take a different road home. And so, of course, the most obvious way that Eastern people share or show fellowship is to sit down at a meal. So he refuses Jeroboam's invitation and starts back home. And an old prophet who lived in town there in Bethel, which is strange, and we discussed this last week. Why wasn't that old prophet the one sent to Jeroboam in the first place? Instead of having a young prophet from down in Judah come up to the north and confront Jeroboam there. Do I hear that? I do?
Yeah.
Okay.
Question is to start.
I don't know where. Okay. Okay, is that better?
Much.
I don't know what it is. Okay. The old prophet hears about the young prophet and tracks him down on the way home. And let's see. He asked him to come eat with him, and the young prophet's response was what?
Talk with him, no.
No, why? Because the Lord had told me not to do that. I'm still up here in the north, and I'm not to show fellowship with anything that goes on up here or any person up here, indicating that God is really upset with Jeroboam and the northern people who have decided to follow him. The man said, the old prophet then said what?
That an angel came and spoke to him.
I got a message from an angel that told me to tell you to come to my house and eat. So the young prophet, he's probably hungry, I'll give him that, agrees to the old prophet's request. That's in verse 19, by the way, if you're trying to follow along. And when they got there, the young prophet was condemned roundly by the old prophet for doing what the old prophet had just asked him to do. That's in verses 20 through 22, and I'd like to read those with you. Now it came about as they, the two prophets, were sitting down at the table, that the word of the Lord came to the, I'm adding the old prophet, who had brought him back. And he cried to the man of God, that's the young prophet, who came from Judah, saying, Thus says the Lord, because you have disobeyed the command of the Lord, and have not observed the commandment of which the Lord your God commanded you, but have returned and eaten bread and drunk water in the place of which he said to you, quote, Eat no bread and drink no water, because of that your body shall not come to the grave of your fathers. That is, you will not be given a decent and honorable burial with your kindred. And we didn't realize how quickly this was going to be fulfilled. And he didn't say anything about when this was going to happen at all. And let's not discuss what we discussed last week about the what-ifs and the speculations and the whys and the wherefores, because more speculation is just going to leave us with more unanswered questions about concerning why God sent a message to the old prophet. While the old prophet said an angel told him to deceive this young prophet, or to tell him that, and then the Lord turned right around and used this same old prophet to condemn the young man. Very strange. Leaves me scratching my head every time I read this. Brother Moody, have you got all this figured out for us, brother?
Well, think about it. He lied. So God's like, okay, you're going to lie using me. I'm going to use you to condemn the one you just misled.
Okay. Okay.
How do you think that sat on his heart?
I don't know. Probably not well. Probably not well. And it's interesting how the old prophet is going to treat the younger prophet after the disaster. But anyway, to be unable to go to the grave of your fathers was really, especially to the Jew, the desire to rest with your fathers was especially strong. And you'll notice that most of the kings who are good kings, they go to rest with their fathers. They want to be buried with their kindred. And the young prophet in verse 24 finishes the meal after hearing the bad news from the older prophet. And as he's walking along, he is mauled and killed by a lion. And in verses 28, the old prophet got the message, the news about what had happened to the young man. And verse 26, he knew that God's judgment had been fulfilled upon this young prophet. So he left home after hearing the news and found the young man's body laying down on the road with the lion still standing there. And the donkey the man was, the young prophet had been riding, standing there also, just like sentinels, I guess, maybe with the idea maybe they were guarding the body. I don't know. Is that natural?
No.
No, that is not natural. That is supernatural. You would think the first person that would, the first thing that would happen would the lion would take care of the donkey for lunch. But there's,
Or eating the man after he killed him.
yes, yes. And I have an idea that this strange incident was to ensure that everybody heard about what happened to this disobedient young prophet who had a very special and important message to take to the northern kingdom, to Jeroboam specifically, at that site of the golden calf and the altar. And that he had undermined his own message and his own credibility by breaking God's law, by going in to eat with the old prophet. And so God gave the message that way, but that the only thing I can figure is that would make sure that everybody heard about the disobedience of the young man and what he had done, so that it wouldn't be, so that his death wouldn't be lost on people, and why God punished him, I suppose, for undermining his own mission. Yes, sir, Mike.
I think what we can hear from the old prophet, that it's going to confirm that everything this young man has said is going to come true.
Yes, yes. In verse 29, he very carefully and reverently took care of the corpse of the young prophet and buried him in his own tomb, so he did not go to rest with his own fathers. He went to rest with the kindred of the old prophet who had gotten him killed, gotten him in trouble, and then gotten him killed. And I guess the old prophet probably thought I couldn't do less after me sharing at least some of the responsibility for what had happened to the young man. And he asked his sons to honor him by burying him in his own body in the grave right beside the young prophet, again, that he had been at least partially responsible for his death. Now, everybody has probably heard the news about this strange incident, and what was Jeroboam's reaction? Didn't change a thing. You remember Jeroboam the young prophet had told Jeroboam that this altar is going to fall, split apart, and the ashes are going to be poured out. And it happened right in front of him, and he healed his hand that was withered. And then this incident with the young and the old prophet, all three of these things had no effect upon Jeroboam at all. Let's see, that's in verse 33. And he stayed on this sinful course in verse 33, and the judgment was given in verse 34. This event became sin to the house of Jeroboam, even to blot it out and destroy it from the face of the earth. Any more questions or any more enlightening comments on this strange story? Okay, because I don't have anything to add. Okay, chapter 14. We've run into Jeroboam in his first executive act to set up a system of false worship to protect his kingdom. At least he thought so. Who had guaranteed Jeroboam's kingdom in the first place? Huh? God had. Yeah. God through Ahijah, the prophet, had guaranteed that if you'll do what I asked, you won't have any worry about your family continuing. He made him continuing to rule. In fact, he made from the end the same promises he had made to David.
John Lloyd,
Yeah.
I was thinking a minute ago, verse 34
Yeah,
is it was, if you do this, well, this was the answer to if you don't.
yes,
Verse 34 was.
yes. Yeah, it's another, I don't know what your other translations have, but the beginning of verse 34 has this event became sin, and in the margin it has, by this thing he became sin, responsible for leading Israel down the rosy path to destruction. Okay, chapter 14, we're going to read about Jeroboam and his rule and God's judgment that's going to come along very quickly. Now, it's another strange little incident. Jeroboam's son is sick. And if you'll notice back in the previous verse, verse 34, what did God say I'm going to strike? His house or his family or his dynasty. The first verse of the next chapter is the beginning of God's carrying that judgment out. Let's see, he said he fell sick, and if you look at Deuteronomy 28, you'll find that one of the penalties for disobedience, at least in my translation, is this: consumption, fever, inflammation, plagues, chronic sickness, and diseases. And it is Exodus 23:25, the blessings for obedience. One of those blessings is removing sickness. So it's clear that God's judgment is coming in this form. So he's beginning to cut off Jeroboam's family already. But Jeroboam sends his wife to Ahijah the prophet. Now this is the same man that had told Jeroboam the kingdom of the 10 tribes is going to be yours. God's giving it to you. And he sent her how? In a disguise. There's all kinds of speculation about why he did that. Did he not want people to know that he was sending his wife to a prophet of God instead of one of his own false prophets? That would have looked pretty bad. You know, you would think you would want to use one of your own people. Or was he convicted that he hadn't heeded Ahijah's advice to live as David did back in chapter 11 and verse 38, and hoping that Ahijah would have mercy or God would have mercy on him? We don't know. But if you'll notice, he sent a gift along with the woman who was dressed in common clothes, and it was a small gift. And it was common back at that time, if you wanted the prophet to do something for you, you took something gift-wise and gave the prophet for his help. Let me see here. Verse 2, go to Shiloh, he tells his wife. Verse 3, he will tell you what will happen to the boy. What did he not do?
He didn't ask him to pray for
He didn't ask him for healing. He said, I just want to know what's going to happen to him. Never asked God to heal the boy. I find that extremely strange too, unless he figured, well, there's no way that the prophet of God's going to help my son, so I'll just try to find out what's going to happen. But I still will, at least, since it's your own son, ask the prophet to pray to God for help and to heal the young man. But he didn't. Let's see. Now, Ahijah was an old man and he was blind, but the Lord told him that there's somebody coming and what the deal was before the woman ever knocked on his door. And when she did, down in verses 7 through 9, Ahijah gives the woman, the wife of Jeroboam, a list of the charges against Jeroboam. And the summary is in verse 9, that Jeroboam had done more evil than all of the judges and the kings who had lived before him. That is, he was setting a new standard for Israel, and that standard was in evil. Down in verses 10 through 16, the charges have been made, and now we're going to learn the judgment against Jeroboam's sinfulness. Verse 10 and 11 tell us that the dynasty of Jeroboam is going to be completely eliminated. Every last male will die. And there will be even further disgrace because they will not be buried in honor, but instead eaten by scavengers. Another disgrace. In fact, that was the climax of disgrace and disaster, was to have not be able to be buried with your kin, but to have your body left out, to just be consumed by scavengers. He told Jeroboam that your son is going to die, but at least he's going to have an honorable burial. Apparently the Lord saw something good in this young man, but that did not change the judgment against Jeroboam's family. He was still, even though he had good in him, he was still going to die. Now he was probably something else to Jeroboam that was very important too. He was probably the heir, more than likely. Verse 14, the Lord told Jeroboam, the prophet did, that he's going to raise up a man named Baasha, who would cut off completely Jeroboam's entire family. And for your information, it was only 25 years from the time that Jeroboam became king until the slaughter of his family. 24 years. Verse 15, God says, I will uproot and scatter Israel. And of course, remember, the readers are those in exile, and that will be particularly interesting to them in explaining their plight in the exile. And also, I want you to notice down in verse 15, he accuses Jeroboam of making Asherim, which is a pillar to a female, if I remember correctly, disgusting idol god. And what does that tell you about their progress from what started as calf worship? It was progressing from bad to worse. They had gone simply from the calf at Dan in Bethel to worship the god, supposedly. This was the God who brought you out of Egypt. And now they're worshiping idols. Does that surprise us? No, it doesn't. Because once you set a course for evil, it almost always gets worse. Yes, sir, Brother Moody.
Well, and the funny thing, the whole time when the temple was there and they were worshiping, behind the scenes they were still worshiping false gods and idols at the same time.
Yes. And when you look at these statements in the Old Testament about idolatry, it usually does not mean that they abandoned Yahweh altogether. They still went to the forms, at least, of worshiping the one true and living God, while at the same time worshiping idols. They just added them together. Let's see. So, verse 15 tells us something. Not only would Jeroboam's entire family be decimated, eliminated, but the entire kingdom of Israel was going to be eliminated also. So it goes beyond Jeroboam's personal family to the entire 10 tribes who are going to pay for following Jeroboam's lead, first into the calves at Dan and Bethel, and then into idolatry, as verse 15 tells us. So the price of sin in Jeroboam was just colossal. Colossal. Not only personally, but nationally. Okay, verse 17 and 18 tell us that the judgment is beginning to fall. As soon as Jeroboam's wife, who was in the meantime on the way home to Tirzah, by the way, which was the capital of the northern kingdom at the time, it would be in Samaria a little bit later. As soon as she hit the threshold of her home, the young boy, died. And the child, in verse 18, was honored just as Ahijah, the prophet of God, had spoken. And in the last three verses, we learned that Jeroboam reigned 22 years, died, was buried with his fathers. Now, who was not going to be buried with their fathers and eaten by scavengers? Not Jeroboam, but his descendants, yes. So Jeroboam was spared that disgrace. He at least was buried with his fathers. And his son Nadab begins to reign. Okay, in verses 21 through 31, we're going to go back from Bethel and Tirzah up in the north, and we're going to move back south again to Judah, to the reign of Jeroboam, which we picked up a couple of chapters ago. What happened with Rehoboam the first time we learned, or that he was talked about? He became king, and then we had a little spat, an argument about how hard I'm going to be on you, and the kingdom split. And then we left Rehoboam, moved up north to talk about Jeroboam. Now we're coming back south to talk about Rehoboam again, after the kingdom was split, permanently split. And he was the son of Solomon and his wife Naamah, who was what kind of a woman? Verse 21. It was one of his foreign wives. He was 41 when he began to reign, and he reigned 17 years, so he lived to be how old? We talked about their short lifespans, 58 years old. And he was dead. Remember I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, it seems like that they're not, most of them don't even get to 60. And here's another one that doesn't. And then we learned about Rehoboam's falling away in verses 22 through 24. And he says that during Rehoboam's reign, Judah made God more jealous and angry than all of their predecessors or their fathers had done. They had built pagan shrines or high places for probably the worship of idols. So Judah now follows the example of her northern kinfolks in the kingdom of Israel, and they were even less without excuse for doing what they had done. Remember, they had God's priests who were charged with teaching them. They had the temple there in Jerusalem for the worship of God. They had the awful example of what happened up north. And I'm sure they heard about what happened to Jeroboam at the altar there. And so they were even less excused on the path that they had chosen. Verse 24 tells us that Judah practiced the fertility rites of prostitution and homosexuality, or sodomy as the ASB has. So both kingdoms are now going very, very badly wrong. And the price of sin is seen in verse 25 through 28 when an Egyptian pharaoh named Shishak, some translations have Shishonk. This is the same man that back in chapter 11, verse 40, had given asylum to Jeroboam. You remember Solomon heard about Jeroboam's being promised the kingdom, and Solomon started looking for him, and he ran and hid and found shelter in Egypt under this same man, Shishak. And it says he came up against Rehoboam. I'm not sure why it doesn't say. He just said, well, I just want to make my kingdom larger, or I have heard about what's in that treasury. You remember how much gold we talked about with Solomon? And all of that, a lot of that was deposited in the treasury, in the surrounding rooms in the temple. And he said, I'd like to have that. And he heard about the split, which would make the kingdom much more susceptible, weaker. And so he says, maybe at this time it's a good time to go up there and get what I've been wanting for years. And Rehoboam in verse 25 and 26 was forced to bribe or to pay off or to buy off Shishak with the treasures and all the things that he wanted, probably to keep Jerusalem and his kingdom from being completely destroyed. And there's a good example of what happened to the kingdom in a metaphor, if you please, in 27:28. Rehoboam went from gold to less expensive bronze, downhill. And that's a pretty good picture of what happened to his kingdom. And verse 29 through 31 are kindly of a summary of everything that happened during Rehoboam's reign. He had constant skirmishes or border disputes with his own kin up in the north, and Jeroboam was probably party to part of that. Border skirmishes. He dies in verse 31, and his Rehoboam's successor is a man by the name of Abijah. Some translations have Abijam, alternate spelling for the same man. Yes, John?
In my, part of my comments underneath,
Yeah.
it said that the invasion, Shishak's invasion, is described in detail. I found the loss of the temple of Amun in Thebes, where more than 150 towns that Shishak plundered in Judah and Israel are listed.
150 towns.
And so this is all attested to.
Outside.
Walls of-
Outside the Bible. Okay, I did not know that. Did not know that. Oh,
It's interesting that name, which it says Elijah, my son, but it also says Elijah, is the same name of the child that became sick and died of Jeroboam.
was that his name? Where did you find that?
It says in that first verse.
Oh,
One of the first verses there.
Yeah. And one, it says Elijah, but then in my notes, and it also says Abijah.
okay.
And then the priest, I couldn't help but notice before too, the priest was Ahijah or Ahijah, whatever. So many similarities.
Yeah. I tell you what, it's 3 minutes till. Let's stop at a nice breaking place. And we'll begin with chapter 15 next week. Let's see, we finished 13 and got 14 done. We didn't do too badly. Do we have any questions or comments? By the way, if you're interested, there's a lot more on Jeroboam in Chronicles. A lot more. And I started mentioning the things that were in Chronicles that we were skipping over. I figured we need to stay in Kings. But if you've got a reference Bible, which most of you have, it'll tell you where in Chronicles, same thing that you're reading about in Kings can be found. And sometimes it will be, especially if it's the kings of Judah, will be greatly expanded upon, and you'll learn new things that the writer of Kings didn't mention at all. Any questions? Let's pray. Father, give us understanding and give us sympathy for these people of old and for the mistakes and the sins they committed, realizing, Father, we are the same flesh. And help us, Father, tonight to learn to trust in you and to lean upon you for all things and not to make the same mistakes that these people made. Forgive us of our sins and help us to walk in a better way. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you all.